what fools the nations are to rage against the Lord.
We've propelled, birds propel, eagles don't propel. We've said, oh God, 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 oh God.
Rite ed esultate, diletti figli e figlie, poiché la vita che si rinnova in Gesù.
There will be 50 people give $1,000, and do it right now, or I am finished.
You know, people don't even want to know the truth. People don't want to know the truth in the Bible. If you want to turn the channel, go ahead, fool, turn the channel.
There's 15 devils.
Yea,
saith the Lord. Yea, saith the Lord. Yea, come out of him, you foul devils.
Aveva detto al terzo colpo, aprite le porte, poiché Dio è con noi. Ora si toglie la mitra, si inginocchia, intona il Te Deum. Adesso col cielo in una mano, la croce astata nell'altra, il varco dei Romei.
Devil's Bible. The Devil's Bible, otherwise known as the Codex Gigas, is a massive book said to harbor an immense amount of negative energy. I mean, duh, it's called the Devil's Bible for a reason. So basically, legend goes that this 157-pound book was written by a monk. But this monk broke his spiritual vows, and so he was sentenced to be sealed behind a brick wall and left to die. But the night before his death, he realized he wouldn't be able to finish this book. So he summoned Lucifer and asked him to complete the book for him. In return, he offered him his soul. So legend goes that the book was finished by the devil himself. What's creepier is that some of the pages are filled with drawings of the devil and other demonic entities. On one page, there's a 19-inch drawing of Satan. The book also contains a bunch of dark rituals and texts. If the book got in the wrong hands, who knows what damage they could do.
Coming in at number 9, we have the Voynich Manuscript, a book that has baffled all of the best minds in the world. It was discovered by antiquarian book dealer Wilfred M. Voynich near Rome in an old chest in 1912. It immediately caught his attention due to its lackluster appearance, which was unlike all the other pretty ones in the compartment. But what he found inside became a mystery that keeps getting stranger. Apparently the codex was purchased by Roman Emperor Rudolph II, who believed it was written by Roger Bacon. But Bacon lived in the 12th century and the paper carbon dated to the 15th century, so already Inside the book has remained incomprehensible to even the most impressive cryptographers and linguists. They've identified at least 25 to 30 characters, and though the writing and illustrations don't make sense, it doesn't appear to be gibberish. Alan Turing all the way to artificial intelligence have all taken turns, but to no avail. From images of planets long extinct and intricate astrological signs, no one knows what the hell it means, but many speculate that it could have been written, get ready for this, by aliens. Of course, when we don't know the answer, aliens! It's the only logical solution. But if it does belong to aliens, what if they want it back?
And at number 8 we have Untitled Grimoires. Grimoires are witches' spell books, but it's said that they need to be burned after the witch's death. However, this one was not burned. Instead, it was kept, and in 2013 it sold on a website. It was sold for $13,865. That's a lot of money for a book. But here's the thing, the book came with a warning. It said, and I quote, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further, or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hand of the craft. So basically, the book is cursed if it falls into the wrong hands. This book is also said to contain a number of curses, enchantments, and spells. Also, it tells you how to perform an exorcism, you know, just in case you summon a demon and then everything goes wrong. I mean, any book that tells you how to summon ghosts and demons should just be burned. I'm sorry.
Coming in at number 7, we have Tomino's Hell, and here is yet another book that you should never read, because if you do, your lives and the lives of those you love could be in jeopardy. Tomino's Hell was written by Yomoto Uniko in a book that's titled The Heart is Like a Rolling Stone. Legends of how this curse started vary, but results such as vomiting glass and loved ones dying tragic deaths continue to be associated with the poem. One radio show host tried to read it aloud on air, and halfway through started to feel ill and disturbed and wasn't able to finish it. He continued to feel ill, and a few days later he got into an accident that resulted in him having to get 7 stitches. To this day, he tries not to even think about the poem and warns other people against it. But I thought I'd surprise everyone today and read the poem out loud, so we'll see. But let's see if this myth is true, shall we? Here's the poem. Just kidding! I'm not gonna read it out loud, and nor should you.
In our 6th spot, we have the Book of Soiga. Sounds weird, I don't know if I pronounced it wrong, but we're gonna roll with that. This book has quite the history behind it. So it was created in the 16th century and is a Latin essay all about demonology. Apparently, there are only 2 copies in existence. One was owned by a man named John Dee and his brother. They both were determined to translate the entire book. Upon translating it, they figured it was a book filled with dark rituals and incantations. But the last 36 pages were untranslatable. He became so obsessed with trying to figure out what the last pages read that it drove him to madness. After his death, the books were lost for the longest time until 1994. That's when 2 copies were found. Now legend goes that those that successfully decipher the final pages of the book will die within 3 years. So it's up to you. Will you tempt fate and decipher the pages, or should we burn the book so that no one else dies? I'll go with the latter.
The Orphan Story, coming in at number 5. This book started out innocent until it started racking up victims. The Orphan Story is an adventure book about a Spanish teen who ventures to Lima to party like there's no tomorrow, and then there's other adventures and romantic stories and yada yada yada. It was written by an Augustinian friar named Martin de Leon between 1605 to 1615, who'd also been to Lima, but he never wanted to get it published for fear that it would taint his chances in becoming archbishop, but that didn't stop people from trying, and maybe it should have. When it was rediscovered in the Hispanic History Archives, many were discouraged from working on it as it was believed to be cursed. Dun dun dun! Those who had tried to publish it before had all died, one from a random car accident and the other from an entirely mysterious disease. No one touched it for years until one brave man took on the task once more. It was actually published for the first time in 2018, and the publisher believes that the curse has finally been lifted. Not that there wasn't a curse in the first place, but like maybe things will get worse now, who knows? Maybe the curse is waiting for, I don't know, 3 years.
In our 4th spot, we have the Book of Sacred Magic. This 15th century book was written by a man named Abra Malin, who was a mage, aka that's just a fancy word for a magician. Well, he wrote this book for his son, and apparently it's cursed, because why not give your son a cursed book? I mean, it probably wasn't cursed when he got it, but that's besides the point. Anyways, in the 1900s, the book was translated into English, and soon after, people deemed it a curse. Throughout the book, it talked about rituals on how to control your demons. Abra believed that every person had their own demon, not like a metaphorical one, but like a literal one. It also talked about how to perform other supernatural acts. In the end, it was believed that whoever owns a copy will be haunted by the spirits, and bad luck will befall on them. Again, possessions and haunting and bad luck, it's a no from me.
Coming in at number 3 with the Necromonicon. Again, I'm gonna bring this up, but you know that scene from The Mummy when Evie is like, what harm has ever come from reading a book? And then proceeded to unleash hell by reading the Book of the Dead? Well, lesson learned, right? No, because the Necromonicon, also called the Book of the Dead, is an ancient grimoire, and as we know, we should burn grimoires, but we don't. And it's bound in human skin and has inspired many horror films like Evil Dead. This book is so powerful, some even say one word from its pages and horrors beyond your wildest nightmares will emerge. This book was featured as a fictional object in H.P. Lovecraft's stories, and he even allowed authors to cite it as a source so it could become more real. Lovecraft insisted it was made up, but many tried and true fans of the occult think otherwise. They think that the book in fact exists, but it's hidden so it will never cause any harm. HP says the idea for the book came to him in a dream, but many say that the spirit of the book chose Lovecraft to reveal it, meaning there are people hunting for the real thing. My advice? Don't. Leave it alone. Again, we don't need it. Demons can stay where they are, okay? In our second spot, we have The Great Omar. This is another book that has quite the dark past. So basically, in 1909, a man named Sangorsky decided to create a much fancier version of the book The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. I'm gonna apologize right now, I know I totally butchered that name. Now he bejeweled it and made the cover look absolutely beautiful. It took him 2,500 hours to create. In the end, it had 1,500 precious / semi-precious stones, 4,967 leather inlays, and 600 sheets of 22 karat gold leaf. It's honestly a very beautiful book. But the thing is, no one wanted to buy this super expensive book when they could literally just get one for much cheaper. But eventually it was put up for auction, but it only sold for £450. Now, the book was shipped, but it never got to the buyer. Why? Well, the ship it was being transported on was the Titanic, and the book went down with the ship. Then only a few weeks later, the creator of this book mysteriously drowned. Ain't that a freaky coincidence? But that's not all. A second version was created called The Great Omar II. It was then placed in a bank vault, but the bank was hit by a bomb during the London Blitz of World War II, and this copy was destroyed as well. Then a third copy was created because they didn't learn their lesson, and it was donated to the British Library, where apparently it's still to this day. But due to its dark past, many believe that this book is cursed, and that bad things will happen to whoever owns it. Coming in at number 1, you know what sucks is that there's a PDF version of this book that Lindsay and I found, and we were both like, no! Like, we opened it by accident, we're like, no, I don't want to read this, I don't want to read this, I don't want to read this. It's really creepy. So this one is The Lesser King of Solomon. The Lesser King of Solomon, or the Goetia, is one of the most famous grimoires and contains a summoning spell for over 72 demons, and no one knows who wrote it. Written entirely in Latin, the book dates back to the 14th and 15th century, though any remaining manuscripts date to the 16th and 18th. Legend has it that King Solomon originally had it written for his son and asked him to bury it with him in his grave when he died. But supposedly, a group of Babylonian philosophers discovered it while repairing his tomb, and one of them was said to have had a vision sent to him by an angel that told him to hide the book from the unworthy. He did so by casting a spell on it, which clearly didn't work. The first few chapters contained instructions on how to summon and trap demons in this world, which, by the way, why? I doubt they're as sexy as Lil Nas, okay? But if you're looking for love, the book also contains instructions on how to find it and also how to become invisible. Obviously now, copies of this book can be found on the internet, but please, for the love of all this stuff, like, just don't. Just burn it, you know? Have someone burn it from the internet. It's just too much out there. We don't want to know what's on the other side. Just yet, anyways.
And is The Exorcist. I would be doing an injustice if I didn't start with one of the scariest movies of all time. And why was it the scariest movie of all time? Because it was one of the scariest books of all time. Written by William Peter Blatty and published in 1971, the book takes place in Washington, D.C. and follows demonically possessed 12-year-old Reagan McNeil, who is also the daughter of a very famous actress. The duo are in Georgetown whilst the mother is filming when Reagan becomes sick. Weird things start happening around the house, which her mother tries to find rational explanations for, and Reagan's condition intensifies and deteriorates. Nothing helps her until the mother gives in and turns to a priest for help. A pair of priests spend the whole book trying to exorcise the demon, and it was actually based off of a real case of possession William heard about in the 50s. I don't want to go into more detail and include spoilers, because if you haven't read it, you definitely should. I feel like scary books just scare you in a way that movies just can't. When I used to read them at home alone, I physically could not continue reading because I was scared. I was scared of reading. Like, that is a real fear, people. Coming in at number 9 is Blindness. Written by Jose Saramago and published in 1995, the book follows an unnamed city or country that's been afflicted with an unexplainable epidemic of blindness. And since most people there go blind, a social and economic breakdown soon follows. The plot involves a group of unnamed characters, and the book is written in really long sentences, and there are no speech marks around the dialogue, so you're also like, wait, who's speaking right now? The first half of the book takes place in a dirty, overcrowded asylum where the group and countless other blind people have been quarantined, and the whole thing descends into anarchy basically. People are worried about the availability of food, necessities, no medicines are allowed inside, so even a small infection could end up deadly. Gangs start forming, they start raping women in exchange for giving them food. It just gets really, really bad. The only person in the land that doesn't get infected was the doctor's wife, and we follow how she has to try and help the group survive. At number 8 we have The Haunting of Hill House. It's not a horror if a haunted house isn't on this list, am I right? Written by Shirley Jackson and published in 1959, the book has been dubbed one of the best literary ghost stories in the 20th century. It went on to become 2 films, a play, and the basis of a Netflix series, so it's safe to say even in the 21st century we are getting a lot of inspiration from it. Shirley even drew the floor plans of the house and its outside before beginning the novel. The plot takes place in a mansion called Hill House and follows 4 main characters: an investigator of the supernatural, Eleanor, a shy girl, and a disabled mother, Theodora, and the mansion's heir, Luke. They all come to the house because of having experienced something paranormal or wanting to investigate the paranormal. The house itself has been the site of many deaths and suicides, and as their stay progresses, creepy things start happening, as they always do. The house itself seems sentient and angry, but the best part of the book is the narrator. We trust Eleanor from the start because she seems quite reliable and sweet, but as the book progresses she becomes more and more unreliable, she starts descending into madness, and then it gets confusing on whether the things happening in the house are really happening, or she's just seeing things or hallucinating them. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Filling our number 7 slot is The Silence of the Lambs. I don't know how I could have made this list and not included Hannibal Lecter. Written by Thomas Harris and published in 1988, the book is actually a sequel about the forensic psychiatrist and cannibalistic serial killer Dr. Hannibal Lecter. First of all, has anyone seen the show Hannibal? I watched the first season. I could literally only watch 1 episode a day, not even binge it, because it was just too taxing watching such screwed up things happen for so long. Like, I used to have to mentally prepare before watching it. But anyway, at this point Hannibal is already in jail, so the plot follows an FBI trainee called Clarice who is given the task of drawing up psychological profiles of serial killers, starting with Hannibal. Well, that's what she's told, but her real mission that she doesn't know about is to try and get Hannibal's help identifying a new serial killer on the loose dubbed Buffalo Bill. The plot follows her periodically visiting Hannibal and probing him about the killer. He gives her cryptic clues in exchange for knowing about her disturbing childhood as an orphan. This book won 2 awards for Best Novel, and it's a literary gem. I haven't met anyone who hasn't heard of The Silence of the Lambs. Like, they won't even know what it is, but they would have heard of it for sure. Now at number 6 is Carrion Comfort. Written by Dan Simmons and published in 1989, it won the Locust Poll Award for Best Horror Novel, the Bram Stoker Award, and the August Derleth Award for Best Novel. Stephen King even calls it one of the greatest horror novels of the 20th century, so based on that, I reckon it's a pretty good book. The book focuses on a fraction of humanity who has intense psychic powers called the Ability. These people can control someone from a distance, and I mean control them, like physically too, as in they could make someone commit murder if they really wanted to. Killing someone indirectly gives the Ability users energy and youth, so they're almost like pseudo-vampires. The book sets up the fact the abilities have been used throughout time, whether that's fake charisma of a world leader, everyday murders, or the Holocaust. Although it's split into many timelines, it mostly follows a group of immoral people in the 80s, some of which want to take over the world. Investigators pursue a series of murders and realize these people really need to be stopped. It's honestly brutal. They get together in one scene and talk about all the people they killed, including John Lennon, and then later on 2 of them end up fighting but use normal humans around them as soldiers to fight each other. It's screwed up, but isn't every book on this list? Coming in at number 5 is A Head Full of Ghosts, written by Paul G. Tremblay and published in 2015. The book follows an American family that's troubled. The dad is unemployed, they barely have any money, and then things get even worse due to the mental illness of their 14-year-old daughter, Marjorie. The book is told from the perspective of Marjorie's 8-year-old sister, Mary, and it starts when Marjorie starts telling Mary macabre stories instead of innocent Dr. Seuss ones. Welcome to the real world, Mary. Anyway, the dad, who is a born-again Catholic, decides Marjorie doesn't have a mental illness, she's demonically possessed, two very different things, and so he gets the help of his priest to try and exorcise her. And let's just say Marjorie is not really telling the truth. I'll leave it at that. At number 4 is Let the Right One In. Written by John Lindquist and published in English in 2008, the book is essentially a vampire story, but it's not like Twilight, before you guys just skip number 4. And for the record, I just like to say I read all the Twilight books and the books were actually really good. Please do not base the series on Kristen Stewart's acting, thank you. But anyway, the plot follows a 12-year-old boy called Oscar, a vampire child called Eli, and its caretaker Hakan. The story takes place in Stockholm in the 80s and focuses on a plethora of disturbing things like pedophilia, self-mutilation, murder, bullying, genital mutilation, etc. Oscar becomes friends with Eli when it moves in next door, and he finds out Eli was turned into a vampire when they were a child and hence forever remains in a young body and mind. Hakan, Eli's caretaker, was a former teacher who got caught with child pornography, and as you can imagine, he's very much in love with Eli and goes out and kills people and gets blood for them in order to sustain them in exchange for money. Even though Hakan would do it for free if Eli would let them be physically intimate, but we all know that's not gonna happen. The story goes on when Hakan gets caught on his last blood-procuring mission, and things just get worse and worse from there. Death, murder, acid throwing, blood drinking, the book has it all, and it was adapted into 2 feature films. Filling our number 3 slot is The House of Leaves, and this one is hard because half the people who've read it say it's a horror story, and the other half say it's a love story, and I mean there is horror in love and vice versa, so can it be both? But anyway, written by Mark Danielewski and published in 2000, the book itself is incredibly confusing. It has footnotes, and those footnotes have their own footnotes. Some pages just have a few words or a line of text. Some pages you have to rotate the book so you can actually read it. Some pages words are arranged in a way that mirror the story, but basically the format of the book is meant to make you feel claustrophobic. The plot has many narratives, but mostly follows a tattoo parlor employee called Johnny. Johnny's looking for a new apartment when his friend recommends a place in his building from a man who just died. When moving in, he finds an academic manuscript written by that man about a film called The Navidson Record. Except Johnny can't find any evidence of the film ever existing. The main plot focuses on the Navidson family story. The family come home from a trip one day and find that their house is expanded internally, but externally it looks exactly the same. There are more rooms, hallways upon hallways, and all of them are featureless and unlit, and there always just seems to be a low growl sound in the house. Characters start exploring the house and venture into the endless passageways, which ultimately leads to murder, insanity, and death. Now the second plot takes place in the footnotes, and it's about what's happening in Johnny's life, and it gets more and more unclear whether his obsession with the manuscript and consequent paranoia and delusions are because of madness, drug use, or the manuscript itself. The third and final mini-plot are letters woven in from Johnny's mother, who's in a psychiatric hospital. Honestly, with this book you really end up doubting your own perception of the story and what's fact and what isn't, and honestly, what more can you want from a book? Especially a horror book. Now number 2 is It, written by Stephen King, which I'm sure you all already knew, and published in 1986. It is iconic. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the book since the movies are all out as well, and regardless of whether you've seen them or not, I feel like everyone knows what it's about. The story follows a group of kids that call themselves the Losers Club. The kids realize they all encountered the same shape-shifting entity which took the form of their biggest fears. They named the thing It because they had no idea what it was. It wasn't human, it was genderless, it was it. They figure out It is behind all the child murders happening in the town, and they try to stop the evil clown. There's even a bit where Pennywise itself is narrating and telling the reader where it came from. The book is split into 2 timelines taking place 30 years apart, so we see the club as kids in the first one, and then we see them return to Derry in the second one because there's been another slew of child murders. I can't even count the amount of times people have recommended It to me and told me it genuinely scared the living hell out of them, and I still refuse to read it. I'm just not gonna do it. That's not me. And finally, at number 1 is Rosemary's Baby. Written by Era 11 and published in 1967, the book sold over 4 million copies, and that made it the best-selling horror novel of the 60s. The plot follows Rosemary Woodhouse and her struggling actor husband Guy, who recently move into an old Gothic apartment building. Despite being warned about the building's strange history involving murder and witchcraft, they move in anyway. The couple are quickly welcomed by neighbors Minnie and Roman, who Rosemary gets a weird vibe from. Due to some freak accident blinding his theatrical rival, Guy gets a great role and agrees to try for their first kid. Hurrah! But not. But that night, Rosemary has a sexual dream involving an inhuman creature, and the next day she has claw scratches all over her boobs, on her crotch, basically everywhere. And then somehow she becomes pregnant, but then falls severely ill, losing more and more weight and craving raw meat. Everything goes tits up, and I can 100% say Guy is not the father.
Prose of Young Werther. This book has been famously associated with something referred to as the Werther effect because of the negative impact it had on readers. So this book came out in 1774 and it inspired a huge wave of people taking their lives. It was a terrible epidemic. That's how strong the influence had on its readers. So young men started to copy the main character in the book. They would dress the same as he was portrayed in the book, and then later would take their own lives the way that he did in the book. This caused the book to be banned in countries such as Denmark and Italy. It was so bad that people believed this book was cursed, and every young man that read it will soon be tempted to take their own life, even if they were in the right mindset.
In our number 9 spot today, we have The Orphan's Story. This book was originally written in the early 1600s, but it didn't end up getting published until 2018. The Orphan's Story is about a 14-year-old Spanish boy who heads to the Americas. You know, a classic coming-of-age feel-good story, right? Well, not exactly, and that is the reason it took so long for it to be published. While the curse in this book doesn't come from the story itself, there is something dark lurking in those pages. The book's publisher, Belinda Palacios, who worked on the book for 2 years, explained that throughout those years, she was often warned of the cursed book and how every publisher who had tried to work on it before ended up passing away in a mysterious way before they were able to finish the book. When Belinda looked into this, it turned out to be true. Her research showed that those who tried to edit the book before either found themselves in horrible accidents or with strange illnesses. Luckily, Belinda made it through the process unscathed, so let's hope that maybe the curse has been lifted. Either way, it's probably one I'll personally stay away from.
Moving on at number 8, we have the Lesser Key of Solomon. The Lesser Key of Solomon is a cursed grimoire that is said to contain summoning spells for over 72 demons, and no one knows who wrote it. What we do know though is that this book contains a bunch of compiled texts from the 17th century. Some of these texts tell the reader how to conjure and control spirits or demons. This book is apparently so cursed that anyone who keeps a copy of it will die or experience constant bad luck. One person who owned a copy of the book reported the book's pages turning on its own. Another time, the book violently flew across the room and towards them. Although we don't know who wrote the book, legend has it that King Solomon originally wrote it for his son. He then asked him to be buried with it. But apparently, when he was getting prepared for burial, a group of Babylonian philosophers found the book, and one of them got a vision from an angel. The angel told him to hide the book from the unworthy, so he decided to cast a spell on it to keep it from getting into the wrong hands. And that's how the book got cursed.
In our number 7 spot today, we have the Untitled Grimoires. A witch's spellbook should never be messed with. I feel like that should be obvious, but I'll put that out there because apparently it isn't. The Untitled Grimoires are a set of handwritten spellbooks that were sold online for $14,000 in 2013. The books were written in the 1960s by a high priestess of Wicca who was the leader of a coven, and they detail things like spells, incantations, enchantments, and instructions on summoning spirits and demons. So, witch stuff. This is all fine and well unless you're sitting there thinking about how you don't believe. If you're a non-believer, it is best to stay as far away as possible from these books. The seller of the books warned that any non-believers who mess with the book will bring upon themselves a deadly curse, and on the first page of the book, the Wiccan herself wrote that proceeding with the book may have serious consequences. It reads, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution.
retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hands of the craft. I think we can all appreciate the heads up she gave us on this one. Again, this is just another one I'll probably stay far away from, and not just because I don't have $14,000 to spend on a pair of books.
Coming in at number 6, we have The Catcher in the Rye. This book has been linked to a number of murders. It's believed that the book might have inspired these killings. First, we have John Lennon. When John Lennon was shot by Mark David Chapman, apparently he calmly sat down on the curb and started flipping through The Catcher in the Rye as he waited for the police. In fact, inside the book, it was later discovered he wrote, and I quote, "To Holden Caulfield, from Holden Caulfield. This is my statement." And he signed it Holden's name, who is the main character in the book. Furthermore, when police arrested him, he said, and I quote, "I'm sure the big part of me is Holden. The small part of me must be the devil." And during his trial, he even read from the book when it was his turn to address the court. But he's not the only one that's been influenced by this book. After John Hinckley Jr.'s assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan, it was discovered he too was a fan of the book, and a copy was even found on the table in his hotel room. And lastly, let's talk about Robert John Bardo. He took the life of Rebecca Schaefer. Well, he had the book in his back pocket while he did the deed. The list goes on and on. There are a dozen more people that apparently got inspired by this book and went on to harm or take someone's life. So some people believe that this book is in fact cursed and will drive the sane insane.
In our number 5 spot today, we have the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. When you're a practitioner of magic, you probably don't give the same sort of gifts that non-magic folk do. So it is no surprise that Abramelin gifted his son a book of spells and curses. In the early 1900s, this book was translated into English, and ever since then, there have been rumors swirling that the book is cursed, which makes a ton of sense considering, like I mentioned, it is a book of curses. Rumor has it that the cursed nature of this book in part has to do with Abramelin's belief that everyone has their own personal demon. The book holds instructions on how to get your demons under control through rituals and supernatural situations, and it is always risky to reach out to the spirit world, so maybe that's why everyone is feeling like this book is cursed. It's looking like unless you absolutely know what you're doing, the contents of this book just might be too powerful. Those who have had bad experiences with the book explain either bad luck or hauntings from the spirit world are what await for those who dare to read it.
Coming in at number 4, we have the Devil's Bible. The Devil's Bible, otherwise known as the Codex Gigas, is this massive 310-page book said to harness evil and negative energy. It was discovered in 1648 and is 36 inches tall, 20 inches wide, 8.7 inches thick, and weighs 165 pounds. So now there's this really creepy legend surrounding it. Legend goes that the book was written by a monk, but this monk broke his spiritual vows and his punishment was to be sealed behind a brick wall and left to die. The night before his death, he realized he wouldn't be able to finish this book. So he summoned Lucifer and asked him to complete it for him. In return, he offered him his soul. So legend goes that this book was finished by the devil himself. To make things creepier, this book is filled with drawings of the devil and other demonic entities. On one page, there's a 19-inch frightening drawing of Satan. And apparently the book also contains a bunch of dark rituals and facts like how to perform exorcisms. To top it all off, apparently at some point the book contained 320 pages, not just 310. Those 10 pages were ripped out because they instructed people on how to summon the devil. And thank gosh for that.
In our number 3 spot today, we have the Book of Soiga. This one is often referred to as the Book of Death, and that alone is enough to deter me. If you happen to be braver than I, unfortunately it is unlikely that you'll be able to actually read parts of this book because nobody knows what language it is written in. While the first part of the book details different spells and incantations, the ending part is the most mysterious and where the secrets lie. All the letters in the final part are written in separate boxes, and despite people trying their absolute best, it is extremely difficult to decipher. An Elizabethan scholar named John Dee attempted to decode the book, and he apparently called on an angel named Uriel for help. The angel explained to him that only the Archangel Michael is able to interpret the text. Apparently after John Dee passed away, this book mysteriously vanished, seemingly into thin air. This was in 1608, and for years and years no one could find it until it magically reappeared again in the 19th century. I don't know about you guys, but to me that sounds like some real magic. The catch with this one, however, is that it is said that whoever deciphers the meaning of the code will inevitably die 2.5 years later. So I guess this is like the ring of books?
In our second spot, we have the prophecies of Nostradamus. We've talked about this dude a bunch on this channel. Basically, he's a really famous seer and prophet. He's most famous for his book Les Prophéties, which contains hundreds of predictions for future events. And what's scary is that a bunch of these predictions have come true, such as JFK's assassination, the creation of the atomic bomb, rain, and the Great Fire of London, so on and so on. So he's got some credibility. But here's the thing. Are these actually predictions, or are they a list of curses Nostradamus set out for us? A number of people think that it's the second option, and that he literally has cursed us all. He has made these things happen even from beyond the grave. In fact, he managed to curse his grave, so what says he doesn't have the power to curse a book too? Like literally he warned everyone, whoever opens my tomb will be cursed. And guess what? Legend goes that one day during a war, a couple of soldiers accidentally dug up his grave. When they did, they found him with a plaque that said 1793 on it. That was the year they opened the grave. So he predicted when his grave would be disturbed. Not only that, one of the soldiers picked up his skull and immediately was shot dead by a sniper. So yeah, the soldiers were cursed by him, and now we're all cursed by him and this book.
In our number 1 spot today, we have the Grand Grimoire. This book is often referred to as the book with incredible power and has been called one of the darkest books in the world. While the author of this book is still unknown, the contents of it are things like black magic and dark, spooky secrets. It is believed that the book was written sometime around 1521, and it is split into 2 books. Book 1 details instructions on how to summon a demon and how to get the demon to do your bidding. The second book is split into 2 parts, and it details how to make a pact with a demon and how to command the spirit, but with less tools, which means it is significantly riskier than the instructions in the first book. Apparently in the book it even details how someone can call upon Lucifer or the devil. The book describes a few different demons, and it also gives spells that one can do for things like winning the lottery, love spells, becoming invisible. You know, while those spells certainly sound nice, magic like that always comes at a cost. People fear the Grand Grimoire because they worry that if anyone reads it fully, then the devil will enslave their soul. No thank you.
And the Book of Soiga. During Queen Elizabeth I's reign, one of her trusted advisors, John Dee, was a mathematician and astronomer who was beyond obsessed with the occult, who with the help of his medium, spent much of his life trying to decipher this strange magic Latin book. Often referred to as the Book That Kills, it is said that John Dee struggled to decipher the final 36 pages, so he summoned the archangel Uriel to help with the translation. However, Uriel explained that the book only came into existence when Adam ended paradise, and so it could only be interpreted by the archangel Michael. However, what's perhaps most interesting and strange about this book is that after John Dee's death in the early 17th century, the book disappeared off the face of the planet for 385 years, only showing up again in 1994 when 2 copies appeared, one in a British library, the other in a Bodleian library. Now, scholars are still trying to figure out its mysteries, but the book is not an easy code to crack. So far, they've found a disturbingly complicated codex of demonology, magical incantations, and astrology, all of which could potentially cause quite a bit of havoc should the book end up in the wrong hands. Plus, if the legend surrounding it is true, then whoever deciphers the final 36 pages is fated to die within 2.5 years. Coming in at number 9, the Necronomicon. Besides being a tongue twister, the Necronomicon is a truly nightmarish book that not only is said to contain the power to resurrect the dead, but it's also described as being bound in human skin. So already we're off to a cursed start. Now, to be fair, the catch with this book is that it is a fictional grimoire that at one point in time only existed in the world of horror writer H.P. Lovecraft. However, as notoriety grew for the book, a physical version was created, and some say that it holds all the same horrors as the Necronomicon from Lovecraft's writings. Essentially, the fear around this book is that while its origins may have been fictional, bringing it into existence could have brought forward the demons demons that it speaks of, and some believe that opening it could open up a whole world of demons this world is not prepared to face. Coming in at number 8, the Munich Manual. Sometimes referred to as the Necromancer's Manual, this 15th century Latin grimoire centers solely around demonology and the use of dark magic. But what exactly is so spooky about this book? Well, the manual is broken down into 3 sections: illusionist magic, psychological magic, and divination, and goes into intricate details about how to use each of these kinds of magic to get what you want from people. Illusionist magic is pretty much what it sounds like, creating spells that trick people into seeing things that aren't there, while psychological magic is meant to emotionally manipulate others, and of course divination is used to see into the past or future. Now, I suppose, like anything, in the right hands this wouldn't be so bad, but we're imagining the worst possible scenarios over here. Plus, if it were just those 3 things, we might be able to brush it off, but it also goes into how to summon demons and such, so yeah, definitely not a book that should have ever been opened. Coming in at number 7, The Orphan Story. Unlike some of the others on this list, this next book isn't an ancient text or evil manual, but an epic novel written in the early 17th century by Martin de Leon y Cardenas, a monk who broke his sacred vow. However, before you get too comfortable, let me tell you why this is a book you should stay very far away from. Despite being written some 400 years ago, this book wasn't actually published until 2018. And the reason being is that prior to that, every other publication fell through because the involved parties kept dying under mysterious circumstances. Some fell ill and died suddenly, others got into freak accidents, and this pattern continued for just about everyone who came into contact with it. Which, I don't know, maybe that should have been a sign, but hey. Coming in at number 6, Voynich Manuscript. Filled with bizarre symbols, undecipherable language, and crude drawings of nude women, the Voynich Manuscript is mainly of concern because no one is actually able to determine what the heck it's about. So I guess it's kind of a devil you know versus devil you don't kind of situation. From what experts have been able to decipher, the manuscript appears to date back to Central Europe, sometime in the late 15th century or early 16th century, and is thought to be an occult book of some kind due to the references to medicinal herbs and zodiac symbols. But beyond that, it's kind of one large mysterious and creepy book with an unknown author. The first known owner of the book was an alchemist, George Barash, but strangely, George apparently had no idea what the book was or how it became one of his possessions, which, I mean, is definitely very odd. Of course, like many unsolved mysteries, there are some conspiracy theories that have followed it around, the wildest one claiming that the text was brought to Earth by aliens, hence why George would have no knowledge of how it came to be in his house and would explain why no one can figure out the language it's written in. Believers in this conspiracy also say that deciphering the manuscript will unleash the curse, killing anyone who reads it from that point forward. I mean, could it be nothing? Sure. But does that mean I am keen to find out for myself? Absolutely not. Coming in at number 5, the Oralinda book. So I will start off by saying that the general belief is that this book is not a real ancient text, but rather a forgery disguised to look like one. However, forgery or not, it was still written by someone and is super duper evil, so it definitely deserves a spot on this list. The Oralinda book first came to public awareness in the 1860s. However, it wasn't until the 1930s when the so-called historical manuscript became a favorite of World War II Germans and its association with occultism began. Leaders like Heinrich Himmler considered this book the Nordic Bible and believed that it confirmed that the Aryans were the original people of Atlantis and essentially all of Western civilization, thus further embedding their views of white supremacy. To this day, there are some with the same beliefs as Himmler who use this book to defend their twisted beliefs, and for that reason, it may just be the darkest book of all. all. Coming in at number 4, the Picatrix. Presumed to be from the 11th century, this grimoire of Arabic magic has long been considered one of the most disturbing books in history. Now, unlike some of the others on this list, you won't find much about demons or the devil, but instead scholarly work filled with philosophy, astrology, and medieval science, which by itself would be just fine. But along with all of that are some of the most insane recipes known to mankind. For example, there are recipes for concoctions that mix humans and animals' blood, brains, urine, and other bodily fluids with opium or other dangerous substances, promising to achieve magical results. Some recipes promise a transfiguration of sorts, for example. Should you wish to appear in the form of an animal, all you have to do, apparently, is take the semen of a healthy man and put it in an eggshell, together with the semen of the animal you wish to become. From there, simply leave the egg buried in warm manure for 3 days, and your wish will be granted. Now, that is just one spell. There are hundreds of others to choose from, but if that's the general vibe, then, well, I'm good. Coming in at number 3, the Lesser Key of Solomon. Also known as the Clavicula Salomonis Regius, the Lesser Key of Solomon is believed to be a cursed grimoire of demonology that should absolutely never be toyed with. Now, no one is entirely certain who the author or authors were, but it's estimated to have been compiled somewhere in the 17th century, which kind of makes it extra creepy, just considering that it's an old book with no known author. Inside the cursed book, you can apparently find recipes for love potions or liquors of persuasion, and if that isn't quite up your alley, do not fret. It's also said to contain passages on how to conjure spirits and demons, as well as how to control these entities to do your bidding, which, frankly, if you are conjuring a demon, I'm not sure there is much you, a human, could do to control it, but also, I'm not out to test that theory, so who knows, maybe I'm wrong. On top of detailed instructions about how to conjure dangerous demons, there is also a guide on how to become invisible, as well as locate missing objects, which at least that's a bit more practical. But either way, this is not a book you should be snooping around inside, as it's reportedly so cursed that it will doom anyone who so much as has it on their bookshelf. Allegedly, those that have owned it have experienced the book flying violently across the room, pages turning by themselves, and haunting visitations from a shadow creature, which pretty much proves that this book should have never been opened in the first place. Coming in at number 2, Codex Giga. If there was a contest for the largest book, I would definitely put this one in the running. Measuring 3 feet long and weighing 165 pounds, this Latin manuscript is not only massive in size, but also massive in terms of the amount of disturbing content that can be found inside. Written in the 13th century by a Benedictine monk, this gigantic manuscript contains a wide-ranging array of information, from a complete copy of the Bible to how to perform an exorcism. So why is it so disturbing, you might be wondering? Well, first off, besides the Bible stuff, it's filled with dark rituals and imagery, including a 19-inch drawing of the devil. But the real curse all has to do with its origins. According to legend, it's said the monk who wrote the novel had actually broken his vows, and so was sentenced to die entombed behind a brick wall. His fate closing in on him, the night before his death, he decided to write down everything he knew about the human experience. However, as you can probably imagine, not many people can write a 620-page book in one evening, especially when you have to manually scribe the entire thing. So, realizing he would not finish before he would be sent to death, he summoned Lucifer, and in exchange for his help, offered his soul for the rest of eternity. Meaning, the book was allegedly completed by the devil himself. And last up today in our number 1 spot, the Grand Grimoire. Widely regarded as the most potent and deadly of the occult books in existence, the Grand Grimoire was written sometime in the 16th century and remains not only one of the most disturbing books of all time, but just maybe the most dangerous one too. As legend has it, the author of this grimoire was possessed by the devil at the time of writing, and so over time it has also become known as the Gospel of Satan. Satan, and it's certainly filled with enough dark content to make that seem true. Filled to the brim with dark incantations that can allegedly teach readers how to summon powerful demons or even bring back the dead, it's said that anyone who so much as opens the book is offering their soul to the devil, which is a pretty hefty price to pay for opening a book. However, if you are looking to command a legion of demons, I suppose that Satan's gotta get something out of it. Now, jokes aside, this book is actually said to be so dangerous that it currently resides inside the Vatican's secret archives, as not only does it possess the capability to destroy the world as we know it, but it's rumored to be completely indestructible as well, even by fire. So, for obvious reasons, you should not go opening this one.
But we have the Lesser Key of Solomon. This is a grimoire that is said to be cursed. It is said to contain spells that are used for summoning over 72 different demons, and just to add a little air of mystery, no one is exactly sure who wrote it. This is because the book is made up of a few different texts that have been compiled from somewhere around the 17th century. This book is said to be so cursed that even just having a copy of it will cause the owner to either experience constant bad luck or have the worst luck of all with passing away. People have shared their terrifying stories with the book, and they include the book's pages turning on their own, and another person shared that the book violently flew itself across the room at them. How terrifying would that be? While we aren't sure who wrote it, there are rumors or stories that suggest it might have been King Solomon. It is said that perhaps he wrote it for his son and then asked him to bury it with him in his grave. When being prepared for burial, a group of Babylonian philosophers found the book, and this is when they were visited by an angel who told them to hide the book from the unworthy. They then placed a spell on the book which was meant to keep it from getting into the wrong hands, and that is said to be how the book got its curse. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Untitled Grimoires. A witch's spellbook should never be messed with. I feel like that should be obvious, but I'll put that out there because apparently it isn't. The Untitled Grimoires are a set of handwritten spellbooks that were sold online for $14,000 in 2013. The books were written in the 1960s by a high priestess of Wicca who was the leader of a coven, and they detail things like spells, incantations, enchantments, and instructions on summoning spirits and demons. So, witch stuff. This is all fine and well unless you're sitting here thinking about how you don't believe. If you are a non-believer, it is best to stay as far away as possible from these books. The seller of the books warned that any non-believers who mess with the book will bring upon themselves a deadly curse, and on the first page of the book, the Wiccan herself wrote that proceeding with the book may have serious consequences. It reads, quote, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further, or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hand of the craft." That's a pretty sound warning, and one I probably wouldn't just roll the dice on. You know, just to be safe. In our number 8 spot today, we have The Sorrows of Young Werther. We've got a lot of books on this list that are said to contain magic and spells, and this one is a little different from the others on this list because it doesn't. This is a book that came out in 1774, and it is said to have had a large and negative impact on its readers since its release. Apparently, after this book came out, a huge wave of its readers ended up taking their own lives because of this strange and dark influence it had on those who read it. Young men would start trying to emulate the main character of the book by dressing like him, acting like him, that sort of thing, before following his horrifying actions in the book. This actually led to the book being banned in some countries, and for the most part, I'm pretty opposed to the banning of books, but I feel like this is one I can probably get behind. It is believed that even people who were in a completely fine headspace prior to reading the book would still be tempted to follow the dark path after reading it, which is exactly what has led people to believe that this book is cursed. In our number 7 spot today, we have The Picatrix. This is a grimoire that is said to contain a large amount of magic that is presumed to be from the 11th century. This text has long been considered pretty obscene because of the graphic content that exists within it. The pages contain some scholarly work with philosophy, astrology, and even some medieval science, which is actually pretty cool. But then there are things like recipes for concoctions that involve mixing human and animal blood, brains, urine, and other bodily fluids in with or other kinds of dangerous substances. The results are said to be magical, but I am far from convinced. This one definitely isn't the darkest or the spookiest on this list today, which is a nice refresher, and while some of what this book contains is definitely historically interesting, I think it's probably best to stay away from the magic and spells that lurk within. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. This book was of course created by Abramelin, who was indeed a mage, and he created it as a gift for his son. At the time, his son was probably like, a book for my birthday? Thanks, I guess. Books are intimidating. Like, no one really liked Holes the first time they read it. Actually, that's a lie. That's still one of the best books I've ever read. But I bet his son was like Harry Potter with the Half-Blood Prince potions textbook, you know? At first you don't really know what to make of it, but that stuff comes in handy later. Anyway, in the early 1900s, this book was translated into English, and that is when the rumors of the book being cursed began to spread. I mean, this book contained spells, but it also contained curses, so I feel like that rumor likely makes a lot of sense. It is said that this rumor has to do with Abram Mellin's belief that everyone has their own personal demon. I'm just hoping that mine is cool and nice. The good thing about this book, however, is that it holds instructions on how to get your demon under control through rituals and supernatural situations, but then the kicker with this is that it is always exceptionally risky to reach out to the spirit world, so maybe that's why everyone was feeling like this book is cursed. It's looking like unless you absolutely know what you're doing, the contents of this book just might be too powerful. Those who have had bad experiences with the book explained either bad luck or hauntings from the spirit world are what await for those who dare to read it. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Book of Black Magic and Pacts. This book, written by A.E. Waite, is an exhaustive guide to all things occult. It looks at lore, magic, occultist history, and ceremonies. There's certainly no issue with this itself, but when in the wrong hands, things can certainly get a little dicey, especially considering this book has been referred to as one of the greatest overviews of occultism, and it includes a large number of magical spells from a variety of sources. This book is said to also contain rituals of transcendental magic and rituals of black magic. The author of this book, A.E. Waite, is said to have been a British scholarly mystic as well as a poet, and it is said that he was quite a prolific writer on both occult and esoteric matters. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Codex Gigas. This book is said to give the reader the ability to harness evil and negative energy, and is also often referred to as the Devil's Bible. This book was first discovered in 1648 and is massive at 36 inches tall, 20 inches wide, and 8.7 inches thick, and here's what's weird. It weighs 165 pounds. It is said that this book was actually written by a monk, but this monk had broken his spiritual vows. He was of course punished, but in a pretty extreme way, which was to be sealed behind a wall and then left there to die. Right before his passing, he realized he wouldn't be able to finish the book, which is when he then summoned Lucifer and asked him to complete it for him. If I knew you could do that, I would have summoned Lucifer to finish all my book reports in school. I guess I probably wouldn't have been cool with the whole selling your soul thing though. It is said that this book is filled with dark rituals, instructions on how to perform exorcisms, as well as a bunch of creepy drawings of the devil and other demons. Right now it is said that this book has 310 pages, but that it once used to have 320. The 10 pages that were ripped out were said to contain instructions on how someone could summon the devil, so hopefully whoever had those 10 pages destroyed them right away. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Grand Grimoire. This book is often referred to as the book with incredible power and has been called one of the darkest books in the world. While the author of this book is still unknown, the contents of it are things like black magic and dark, spooky secrets. It is believed that the book was written sometime around 1521, and it is split into 2 books. Book 1 details instructions on how to summon a demon and how to get the demon to do your bidding. The second book is split into 2 parts, and it details how to make a pact with a demon and how to command the spirit, but with less tools, which means it is significantly riskier than the instructions in the first book. Apparently in the book it even details how someone can call upon Lucifer or the devil, so I guess who needs those 10 missing pages in the Codex Gigas? Just go out and get the Grand Grimoire and you're right back in the devil summoning game, no worries. The book describes a few different demons, and it also gives spells that one can do for things like winning the lottery, love spells, becoming invisible, you know, magic stuff. While those spells certainly sound nice, magic like that always comes at a cost. People fear the Grand Grimoire because they worry that if anyone reads it fully, then the devil will enslave their soul. No thank you. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Book of Soiga. Anything that is referred to as the Book of Death is definitely one I'll most likely spend some time trying to stay away from. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but that is the least inviting thing I've ever heard in my life. If you don't agree with me on that sentiment, however, the tough thing with this one is that nobody knows exactly what language it is written in. The beginning part of the book definitely contains some spells and incantations. The ending of the book really is where the most mystery lies, and trying to decipher it is no easy task. It is said that a scholar named John Dee once attempted to decode the secret book, and it was so difficult that he needed to call on the angel Uriel for help. Even the angel didn't have the answers and instructed John to call on the archangel Michael, who would be the only one who was able to interpret the text. Here's where this mystery book gets more mysterious though. After John Dee passed away in 1608, the book basically just vanished and no one knew where it went, but then like magic, it just reappears in the 19th century. Despite this extremely interesting story and how it kind of draws you in like you wish you could crack the code that this book holds, it's best to stay away from because it is said whoever is able to decipher the ending of this book will inevitably die 2.5 years later, so is it really worth it? You don't even get a cool phone call to give you a heads up either. No girl coming out of the well, you just get me telling you on the internet. This is the worst sequel to The Ring ever. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Munich Manual. Also referred to as the Necromancer's Manual, this grimoire comes to us from the 15th century and is a text that is largely focused on demonology and necromancy. A lot of grimoires have both good and dark magic, but this is one that focuses solely on the dark black magic. There are 3 different sections to this one. The first section deals with illusionist magic and spells that trick people into seeing things that aren't there. The next is psychological magic, which is meant to use emotion, politics, and things like that in order to gain power over another individual. And if these 2 weren't scary enough, the third section is divinatory spells, which are meant to allow the reader to see into the past, present, or future. One of the most well-known parts of this book is the part that includes instructions on how to make the Mirror of Lilith, which is for the purpose of divination we just talked about.
Favorite amongst murderers at number 10, we have The Catcher in the Rye, which you shouldn't read unless you want to go mad. Oddly, The Catcher in the Rye seemed to inspire 2 very high-profile shootings, the murder of John Lennon and the attempted murder of Ronald Reagan. John Lennon was shot dead on the 8th of December 1980 by Mark David Chapman. The lone gunman from Texas was found to be obsessed with J.D. Salinger's novel and was found calmly reading it on a curb nearby his attack on Lennon prior to his arrest. It seems he wrote his statement inside the novel too. He felt like if he carried out the assassination, he would become Holden Caulfield, the protagonist of the novel. 5 months later, on March the 30th, 1981, John Hinckley carried out an assassination attempt on the 40th President of the United States, Ronald Reagan. It seems that Hinckley's motivation was a weird attempt to win over actress Jodie Foster, whom he had an obsession with. When Hinckley was caught, he was found with a copy of none other than The Catcher in the Rye. Coming in at number 9, we have The Orphan's Story. This story was written by a Malaga monk between 1608 and 1615. Now it's about an orphan from Granada who travelled to the Spanish Empire to seek his fortune. For some reason, the transcript never made it to print, and everyone that seemed to be associated with it died. The manuscript was lost for centuries, some say hidden away because of the curse. Then a string of publishing attempts failed and people just started dying. The book, however, is to be finally published. Belinda Palacios, a Peruvian editor, said that she was regularly warned off the project because of the string of untimely deaths associated with the book. She said it's taken a while because the people who have worked on it died from one strange disease or in car accidents. I think that this is one book that I would steer clear of. Okay, this book may kill you, but not because of demons or devils, but because of cancer. Wait, a book that gives you cancer? Awful. That's right, coming in at number 8, we have Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. When Bradbury's 1953 book about a dystopian future came out, the marketing team had a wise idea. The book is about a group of so-called firemen who burn down the homes and belongings of people who read illegal, non-state approved books. Wouldn't it be cool for the limited edition books to be fireproof? It sure would. The only issue was that people didn't know what was what in the 1950s, and the book was bound with asbestos. You know, the substance that gives you lung cancer. Not great. So while the book in itself is a bit of a scary read, the reality of the book is even scarier. Coming in at number 7, we have the Voynich manuscript. Who knows what is happening and what is contained within the text of the Voynich manuscript? The text is regularly alluded to as the world's most mysterious book. Written in the early 15th century, what the 240-page cryptic text actually says is still a mystery, and it has baffled humans for 600 years. It appears to be written in an unknown language and contains strange illustrations and diagrams. The book has been passed down from emperors and important members of society, eventually falling into the hands of a Polish book dealer. A 2006 book by Nicholas Pelling claims that the text is cursed. Others think that it was secretly dropped on Earth by aliens. There are hopes that Canadian computer scientists may have invented a machine that will be able to decode the enigmatic text. Who knows what we'll discover? Almost as intriguing as what the text said is who or what wrote it. We still don't know. Coming into number 6, we have the Codex Gigas. The Codex is a hefty old chap weighing 165 pounds, so more than me. The text heralds from the 12th century and is referred to as the Devil's Bible. Why? Well, according to the legend, the monk who wrote the text had broken his vow and was due to be walled to death. So what actually happens when somebody's walled to death? Well, it's a bit like being buried alive, but instead you're bricked up in a wall, like in a really small space until you run out of air and die in the wall. Really not ideal. In fact, I feel like it happens in an episode of Jonathan Creek, so if anyone watches that, shout out to you. Anyway, the night before his death, he wanted to create a book on all human knowledge, but he realized that, you know what, that's actually not a long time to write a book. He summoned Lucifer and asked him to finish it for him in exchange for his already damned soul. Apparently this is why there's a picture of the devil in the manuscript. But it's not just any picture, it's a 19-inch tall picture. So, a text written by the devil, surely no good can come from reading it. Coming into number 5, we have the Book of Soiga. The Book of Soiga is an early 16th century treatise on demonology written in Latin. There are only 2 copies of the book in the world, and one was possessed by Elizabethan scholar John Dee, who spent his life trying to interpret the text. Basically, the text is filled with spells and rituals, and it's kinda creepy. He had a pretty good grasp of what was happening, except for the final 36 pages, which he simply couldn't decipher. He and his trusted friend Edward Kelly summoned the spirit Uriel to tell them the meaning of the last pages. Now, the legend says that Uriel possessed Kelly and spoke through him. He claimed that the book came into existence when Adam entered paradise, and that it could only be properly interpreted by Archangel Michael himself. He also said that whoever does decipher the meaning of the final 36 pages will be destined to die 2.5 years after they do so. Coming into number 4, we have the prophecies of Nostradamus. Did Nostradamus curse us, or were his texts a warning? The 16th century French physician wrote a collection of 942 poetic prophecies, many of which have come true. A lot of people think that these quatrains were, like his grave, cursed. If he had the power to curse his grave, why wouldn't his poetry be cursed? Nostradamus famously prophesied the Great Fire of London, the death of King Henry II, the French Revolution, vaccination, the rise of Hitler, the atomic bombs, 9/11 and more. We just don't know what they are yet. Reading these texts may not curse you, but then again, knowledge of a terrible event without the ability to change the outcome must be a great curse indeed. Coming into number 3, we have the Great Omar. The Francis Sangorski special edition of the Great Omar is for sure cursed. Not only was the original one of the most blinging books around, it seemed to be on the receiving end of some seriously bad juju. Emblazoned with gold leaf, gemstones, and peacock feathers, the original copy of the Great Omar sank on board the Titanic and is lost somewhere in the North Atlantic Ocean. Sangorski then died just 6 weeks later as he drowned in an accident in the English Channel. A second copy was made by Stanley Bray, recreating the original. Now that copy was destroyed in the London Blitz. A third copy was then painstakingly recreated by Bray once again, who died just 5 years later. When asked about the book's tragic history, Bray said, "I'm not in the least bit superstitious, even though they do say that the peacock is a symbol of disaster. I'll say." Now the only surviving copy now lays in the British Library. Visit, if you dare. This isn't a book up next, but it is a poem which really is just kind of a short lyrical book. Now I'm not sure you're ready for this, but people who read this poem are doomed to die. In at number 2, we have Tamino's Hell. I know that all men must die and all of that, but Tamino's Hell is said to speed the process way up. The poem is a 1919 Japanese work of literature that is cursed, 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 and cursed again. It's supposed to cause death and tragedy if you read it aloud, so just don't do it. The poem tells the story of a young boy's damnation, his sickness as he vomits blood and travels to the blackest of hells. Lovely jubbly. It isn't just Japanese readers who need to be a bit worried. The poem has been translated into English. Now reading the poem is fine, feel free, even though it is kind of gross. What you don't want to do though is read it aloud in any language, unless, well, just actually don't do it. Finally, at number 1, we have one of the most cursed and spooky books in the entire history of print. We have the Grand Grimoire. The Grand Grimoire is often referred to as the Gospel of Satan or the Red Dragon text, and is a book of spells believed to possess insane powers, but beyond that, it's said to be one of the most intense and potent occult books in existence. Written in the 16th century, the incantation book tells the reader how to summon the dead, and also how to summon powerful demons. Deeper sections of the book allegedly tell the reader how to do a deal with the devil. The book was said to be written by a man who was possessed by Satan. Now, the original text is so dangerous that it is allegedly held in storage by the Vatican's secret archives. The book is so mysterious and famous that it is frequently referenced in pop culture.
Want to see more videos like this one? Click this video next. It's about artifacts that are not from this planet. Yeah, you heard me right. Check the video out now to find out more.